Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm pleased to be joined by Tokiso Nthebe. TK is an author, speaker, and podcast host. In this episode, we'll be discussing TK's insights on how we change the way we think about money and changing the script. TK, welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, Tony, thank you so much for having me. And for my part of the world, it's good evening to your listeners. I'm so excited to be on the podcast.
Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate having you on today. Thanks for your time. We've shared the virtual stage at a couple panels, so it's great to have this opportunity to talk. Let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about who you are and your journey. What is your origin story?
Oh, what a great way to start the conversation. So born and bred in a small country in the southern part of Africa called the Kingdom of Lesotho. It's a monarchy. We have a king and we still have a queen. Tokiso TKay, born and bred in a small town outside of the capital city, Maseru, south of the capital city of Lesotho. Went to boarding school at a very young age. So literally from grade one in our context, went to boarding school. Been in boarding school pretty much all my life, all the way till I finished high school. Went to university in the Republic of South Africa, which is the neighboring country. And by the way, Lesotho is completely surrounded by the Republic of South Africa. And in terms of elevation, we are 1,000 meters above sea level. So in terms of altitude, we are very, very high. So went to boarding school, pretty much very independent. My parents were business owners before they retired. So I grew up in a very business orientated family with a bit of background or a bit of farming. So my dad was a farmer. His father, or my grandfather, was also a farmer. So I come from that kind of background where basically it was a very cash centric business. So I had a relationship with money at a very young age, but I never really understood the relationship or the power that money has. For me, growing up, it was a means to an end. It was a tool. It was a tool of trade. It really was just about that thing that you use to transact and get by. But I never really had a great relationship with it. And from boarding school, growing up in boarding school, very independent, away from home, you also kind of learn to find your feet and find who you are. So, very independent, very ambitious, very adventurous, and also very excited about life. So, I would say I'm that guy. Growing up post varsity, in fact, at university, I studied finance. So, I did a BCom, a Bachelor's of Commerce in Financial Management. So, that's where I really got in love with finance. But fast forward, when I started working, I had a very interesting journey and chapter with money, right? So I started working as a graduate trainee in the banking sector. And obviously, if you work in the banking sector, the assumption is that if you studied finance and you're working in the sector, that you need to understand how money works. But lo and behold, I found myself in a big financial mess. Clothing or retail store credit. I bought a car I could not afford at the time. I was using debt irresponsibly for consumption purposes. So it really started when my finances hit rock bottom. I think it was 2012 when I realized that I'm a finance graduate. I studied finance. I should know better. I'm working in the sector, but here I am in a financial predicament where I have no savings, where I have high levels of debt, where I have no idea what my future looks like, in particular, my financial future and what it is that I want to achieve. So I think in those few remarks, that's my origin story. And that's where my passion for financial wellness, financial literacy started to say that as a finance graduate, you should know better. You should be doing better with your finances. But why are you not doing that? And Tony, my journey into the industry as a financial educator really started with a blog post that I vividly and candidly and honestly documented my what I titled my seven biggest financial mistakes. So because I was feeling so ashamed, because I was feeling so lost, because I was feeling so low, I literally went back to my favorite love, which is writing, and I wrote a blog post. And in writing that blog post, I shared my vulnerabilities with money and the mistakes that I've made. And then I published this on the internet. And after I
Okay.
published it on the internet, I started getting engagement from people to say that, oh my God, I'm also going through the same thing. Oh my God, I also made a similar mistake. And that's when I started to say, maybe I should start a movement to start the money conversations.
That's awesome. Well, TK, I can completely empathize with your story. Is I was a finance major in college, emphasis on investments, and coming out of college, I ran up a lot of credit card debt as well, and found myself, struggling with debt and in a very similar situation, thinking, okay, I should know better, but I don't know about you. But even though I learned all about investing, I learned about banking and all that, I didn't learn anything about managing credit in
Mm.
the finance program. And I think for me, that's the same thing is that's what drove me to become passionate about financial education because it's like, okay, if I'm a finance major and I know everything about investing and all that world, but I don't know anything about credit, how is somebody who doesn't have our education supposed to know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for me, Tony, when you say that, that's when I also realized the responsibility that we need to have as finance professionals, because we do know and we are not doing or applying what it is that we should be doing. What more about people who don't have the knowledge? What more about people who are not privy to the industry? What more about the people who don't understand the jargon that we use? So that for me was quite important.
Yeah. So no, I'm with you 100%. I can definitely identify with the story. So, let's talk a little bit about your book. What inspired you to write Let's Change the Script?
Oh, love it. So the story behind the book, right? So the backstory is that I used to enjoy blogging. So I'd write articles on finance, covering different topics, personal finance in particular, covering topics such as savings and investments, credit management, budgeting, the financial health, retirement conversations. So I started blogging and writing and sharing a lot of personal finance content. But what really inspired the book, Let's Change the Script, is the title also has a very big meaning. So, in the Lesotho context or in the African context, we always give money names. We never call money money. So, in the Lesotho context, we will call money translated into Sesotho is called chelete. So, chelete is money. And parcel is a parcel that you'd get when you go to a retail store, for example, or grocery store. So in Lesotho, they will call money, they'll give money a name called Tšhelete ke Phasele, right? So because of this association and these names that we give money, people were very uncomfortable, still are very uncomfortable talking openly about money. So they'll come to you and say, hey, Tony, about that thing, and that thing would be parcel, about that parcel that you need to give me. And in the context is they'll be talking about money, but they will not say about those $200 that I lent you, can I get it back? So because of the taboo around money, because of the taboo and the sensitivity around money, and because money was treated as this thing that you don't openly talk about, Let's Change the Script came from that to say that it's maybe time that we change the script about money. and let's change the script and start talking about money. So what inspired me was really about how do I get more people to change their relationship with money, to change the script about money, to change how they speak and engage with money. Because I believe that if we openly talk about money, we remove the sensitivity, we remove the power it has over us, and we remove some of the mistakes that we are not making. Going back to the blog post that I shared earlier on, titled My Seven Biggest Financial Mistakes. What I realized in writing that blog post and sharing it is that a lot of people were not talking about money. And because we were not talking about money, it then becomes easy for us to become victims of the mistakes that a lot of us are making. Because when we talk about money to say, hey, I'm thinking of doing A, B, C, and D, I'm in the position to say, oh, okay, have you considered A, B, C, and Z? So that in you making that mistake, I'm then able to help you avoid making the mistake, right? So for me, it was that thing to say that how do I then get this message packaged into one resource that can be distributed globally, regionally, and within the country? And also, what also inspired the book is when I started talking about finance openly and financial literacy openly, I started getting a lot of bookings, and in some cases, I could not be in certain parts of the country. So I would be like, okay, fine. If I can't be there physically and you can't consume my content, here is a resource that will literally shape the conversation for you. And the way I wrote the book, Let's Change the Script, is I wrote it in a very conversational, relatable manner so that when you're reading the book, it feels like we're having this conversation with you. So pretty much that's the story behind the book. The book covers a lot of topics from your money mindset to your relationship with money, to how to get financially healthy, to savings and investments, to retirement, to tax education, tax planning, but also retirement and estate planning. And again, the last few chapters of the book really speak to the entrepreneur, the freelancer who's starting the freelance business, the small medium enterprise that's starting the business, to say, even if you are starting your business, it's also important for you to consider these basic financial, personal finance matters. Because if you don't manage your personal finances, it's likely that you're gonna mismanage your business finances as well. So that's pretty much the book. I'm also excited to say that we wrote the book in 2022, and in 2024, 2025, we are launching the translated version of it, where we actually translated into Sesotho, which is the local language, so that people can now start to say, we're not just talking about finances in a language that we may not understand, but let's talk about finances in our home language or our native language so that we are in a position to make informed financial decisions.
That's awesome, and I think that's true around the world. With some of the guests I've had from the international community, they've said the same thing in their countries, that there's different ways about talking money. But I think even in countries where there's not something like the Lesotho context, that people still will do anything they can to avoid talking about money. So that's so important that it starts with communication.
It really starts. And I will also admit, Tony, that it's not a very easy conversation to have. I've had cases where I have to invoice a client, and even just talking about how much my rate card is or how much my fees are, it's a very uncomfortable conversation. Or in cases where I have to follow up on invoices being paid, it's very uncomfortable. So I can imagine how much more complicated it is when it comes to a relationship, when it comes to a family, when it comes to colleagues, when it comes to the community. But we do need to get to a point where we normalize having money conversations.
Yeah, I am with you 100%, because I struggled with that as a consultant. It's like, oh boy, do I need to raise my rate? Do I, how do I do that? And I don't feel comfortable doing that. And we talk about that, with women who are underpaid, for
Mm.
them to go in and have that conversation. It's challenging, and I hope for people watching and listening, like we talked about earlier about the communication, and our personal struggles with money is like, this is for everyone. Whether you're an advanced financial person or just somebody on the street, is we all struggle with our relationship with money. So TK, let's talk about that a little bit. Is how can people start to have a healthy relationship with money?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. So having been doing financial wellness work for the last 8 years or so, almost a decade doing this work, is for me, I believe that it starts with the mindset, right? For you to be healthy financially or to be healthy in general, it starts in what you believe. It starts in how you speak about money. It starts in what you want your money to be like. So the number of clients I work with, for example, it would be a case where these people have not acknowledged how they are thinking and feeling about money, right? So for me, it starts with acknowledgement. So do you believe that you can be financially healthy? Do you believe that you can make informed financial decisions? Because once you believe it, then it's easier for you to take the next step. The next step would then be to say, let's take stock of where I am, right? I think a lot of us don't really take stock of where we are. And it's exciting because we are in the first half of 2025, where people have been doing New Year's resolutions, where people have been doing goal setting exercises. But it really starts with you taking stock of saying, where am I now? And where do I desire to be? Because before you can even think about where you want to go and mapping out the route to how you're going to get there, you need to know where you are, but also take stock of where you come from, right? So for me, it starts with that review to say, take stock of where you are, but also reflect on what you did well. Because you know what they say, we can learn a lot from history, though it does not always predict the future, but it does inform how we move next. So once you then know where you are, and where you want to go, then it starts with formulating an actual plan. So it starts with the habits that you make on a daily basis. It starts with the conversations that you have. It starts with how you plan your finances, from budgeting to setting the financial goals to putting up a plan to build an emergency fund and so on and so forth. But also having an accountability partner, whether it's a financial advisor, whether it's a financial coach, or whether it's somebody that you trust. Because let's also be honest, Tony, starting that journey is very difficult, right? Taking that first step is very difficult. Changing the money habits is very difficult. So you do need somebody cheering you on and say, yes, Tony, you can do this. Yes, you can do it. Somebody holding you accountable to say that you had said that you're going to spend less than you make. You did say that you're going to put away money for a rainy day. Have you actually done that? Have you actually done what you said you're going to do? So for me, I believe that being financially healthy is a journey. It's a process, but it's also very important before we even embark on that journey to say that for the mistakes that I have made, I need to forgive myself. In my case, where I was highly indebted, I had no savings, I was using credit irresponsibly, in order to get to where I am today, it had to start with me forgiving myself. And I think not a lot of us forgive ourselves because as long as you carry that shame, for as long as you feel like you are not good enough, for as long as you feel like you are undeserving, then being financially healthy will be near to impossible. So I know I've said a lot, but in summary, goal setting, mindset, forgiving yourself, taking the first step, and then being consistent in moving towards your financial goals, and then having an accountability partner, whether it's somebody you trust, a financial advisor, a financial coach, or somebody that can walk the journey with you, because it does get lonely, it does get difficult, and it's very easy to relapse into the old habits that you were making before.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with you. The accountability partner is so important. Talking about the money mistakes and forgiving ourselves is, until we do that, we're going to make the same mistakes over and over again. So,
Absolutely.
what tips would you give somebody to start overcoming their money mistakes and the shame? Because the bigger thing is the
Shame,
shame.
the shame. It's a very difficult one. And again, the psychology of money is also very deep. I work with a lot of clients, and then you find that part of the reason there's a lot of shame is because of the upbringing. I'm not a psychologist by profession, so I want to tread very carefully here. But there's a lot of trauma and a lot of shame that people carry from the upbringing, that filters into the adult life. So for me, it starts with journaling. Journal and document how you are feeling. Talk about the shame because once you name the shame, it then becomes easier for you to work through it, right? Secondly, I'm a big advocate of going to therapy. I do a lot of work with psychologists because part of the shame, like I mentioned earlier on, is not just about the shame because of the money mistakes that you have made, but it could be part of the undealt things from your childhood, from your past relationships, or whatever trauma that you have been experienced in your life. So going to therapy allows you to work through those emotions. I will share a bit about my life when I went to therapy. As I was working through my issues, I realized that I had a bit of validation issues, right? So because I was lacking validation from certain people in my life, is it manifested in how I was making money decisions, right? So sometimes I'll put myself in situations trying to seek that validation. So in part of dealing with the shame is going to therapy because it unearths a number of issues that you may have feel, issues that you may be feeling or that may be lingering in your life. But once you start journaling and once you go to therapy, it then helps you deal and confront those issues. Then the third tip that I will have is, again, going back to a financial coach or a financial mentor. Because once you've dealt with the shame, is it will not change overnight. So then you need somebody to help you walk and change and rewire the financial habits that got you there in the first place. So for me, I would say journaling, going to therapy, getting help from a financial professional, and then taking it one step at a time. I don't think we emphasize enough the importance of those small daily steps or habits that we need to cultivate so that we can get where we want to go. If you've been in debt like I was, it does not change overnight. You will not wake up and suddenly because you feel less shameful will suddenly get the debt paid off. It then means that you need to do that work as well to say, yes, I've been feeling I've been ashamed of the work of the mistakes that I've made, but I have this big giant of loan or credit debt that I need to work through. So what do I need to do every single day in order to clear and get through that? And then I think the last one is celebrating the small milestones. I think as we're working towards becoming financially healthy, we don't celebrate enough of the progress that we're making. And Tony, when I say celebrate, I don't mean that if you've paid $100 worth of debt, then you go spend $200 in order for you to celebrate and celebrate the milestone. I don't mean that. It's that small things of giving yourself a pat to say, you've done well, TK, you've done well, Tony. How then do we move next to the next step in order to get where we want to go? So celebrating the milestones is also very important.
Yeah, and I love what you said. It doesn't mean go out and buy yourself a new pair of shoes,
No,
or
I mean,
whatever.
we're trying to live below our means. We're trying to pay off the debt. We're trying to get to a financially healthy position. So that celebration is not to say, go buy yourself a cupcake, one cupcake, because then we also don't want to mess up with the diet as well. So one cupcake to celebrate or whatever it is that brings you a small token of joy and appreciation for the work that you're doing, but not a new pair of shoes.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think that's really helpful. And I know in the States there's a movement um, for financial therapists. And it's not a huge movement, but there are quite a few people who are financial therapists. And I think, as we talk, is that so much of this is stuff that's covered in therapy. And the best financial advisors that I know or insurance advisors are ones who listen, which is a major part of therapy, and allow, their clients to talk it out. And if you're a consumer, that's something that you should look for, in my mind, in an advisor, somebody who's going to listen to you and help you understand where you are on your journey and not just lecture you about your money.
Sure. And you know what the interesting part when you mention financial therapy is? Is just this week on Monday, I was having a conversation with a professor from the University of the Free State in South Africa from the School of Financial Planning Law. And I was asking him, listen, I've been doing a lot of work with clients, and I'm realizing that I need to beef up my skill set in terms of psychology. So I do know a bit about financial therapy because when I was in the US in 2023 October, is I met a couple of financial therapists. I was like, actually, there's so much that goes into money, there's so much that goes into money beyond just the money itself or the numbers on our dashboards. There is a whole psychological aspect, the psychology of money. So I'm actually very interested personally to venture into financial therapy, do the training, get the certification, because I realized that the two worlds, psychology and finance, are so intertwined and so connected. And with the work that I do through the clients that I work with, half of the time it's the behavioral change coaching that I need to do to say that it's not that you are reckless with money. It could be your spending habits. So how do we coach you to become better at changing the behavior? How do we coach you to deal with the compulsive spending? How do we coach you to deal with the enabling? I've realized that some of the clients I work with enable their families and, because of the lack of boundaries they need to set. So I'm also starting to become very fascinated by the world of financial therapy. So thank you so much for bringing that up. It really just manifests the fact that I am in the right course.
Yeah, I think you are, and that's the same thing I'm hearing from other guests is that a lot of people are thinking in this way, and that there's a lot of non-traditional voices talking about money, on YouTube or other social media platforms, and that's how they talk about money, and they're connecting with hundreds of thousands of people, um, by having these conversations about how you feel about money and all these related topics. So TK, let's switch into what I call the get ready money questions. These are questions that I ask all my guests. They're a little bit more rapid fire. Um, so the first one is, what basic money concept do you wish people knew?
I wish people knew about retirement. I'm very passionate about retirement planning. So I wish people knew more about retirement. And it's a very intricate balance between enjoying your money and life today, but also planning for the future. In the Lesotho context, and I think in South Africa as well, is a lot of people are reaching the retirement age with insufficient retirement capital. But more than just the financial aspect of retirement planning is we often talk about retirement planning from a financial perspective. What I'm starting to realize as well is the social economic aspect also becomes very important. A lot of people get to retirement, they don't have enough money saved, but they also don't have enough activities planned. There's a podcast I was listening to on TED Talks where they were talking about squeezing all the juice out of retirement. And they were talking about the four phases of retirement, where people retire, they're in the vacation mode, then they go into the second phase, which is very emotional. They start losing their routine, they start losing their identity, their health deteriorates, they basically lose the meaning or the purpose of life. And a lot of retirees fall off or die or pass away at that stage. So for me as TK, I wish people could know a lot more about retirement planning, not just financially, but to also say, what will I do or what will I occupy my life with post-retirement?
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot about that, and about what happens, and like you said, is that shortens lifespan is when people aren't engaging. It leads to Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. That is such an important thing. And as society's gray and more people reach retirement, and we have greater longevity because the increases in health knowledge, that if you're not doing these things,
Mm.
the money won't save you. Um,
It won't. It really won't.
so finding that purpose. So next question is, what is one simple thing people can do each year to set themselves up for financial success?
Oh, I love it. I love that question. So what I normally do every year, instead of the traditional New Year's resolutions, New Year, New Me, or financial goals, what I've started doing over the last 3 years is what I call the TKO investment challenge, right? So a lot of people think you need a lot of money to start investing. A lot of people think that you need to earn a certain amount to start investing. So every single year, I develop a 12-month program to say on a monthly basis, let's build up towards this goal, to reach this financial goal, and we're going to build it up on a monthly basis. So what I've seen in the last 12 months, the last 2 years of building this challenge is people are very energized, people are very excited. And at the end of the year, when they smash that investment goal to build their portfolios, there's this joy that comes into mind to say that I'm starting to take care of my future where my money is doing the heavy lifting for me. And what I love about this challenge, Tony, is it's not just about the investment principles or the fundamentals of investing. It then goes back to the basics of financial planning to say, how then do you live below your means? How then do you build a savings for rainy days? But also, how then do you increase your sources of income? So a lot of people will look at the challenge and say, I don't think I can realistically afford to contribute X amount every single month to achieve in this goal. But if I now increase my sources of income, I can be able to do that. So for me, it's a transformation to say that it's not about the investment goal. It's about everything around your financial life that you can transform towards and that you can transform and build towards building and achieving the goals that you want to achieve. So for me, it's that challenge every year. And if we can increase it by 2% every month, I mean, every year, um, it's people starting to build investment portfolios and then forcing the money to work for them. And I think what's also important in closing this particular point is people then are developing the habit of not disinvesting from the investments, you know. So it forces them to take care of their day-to-day living expenses and then leave the money so that it can benefit from the compounding effect to achieve the goals that to achieve the goals it's intended to achieve. So for me, every year it's that investment challenge that we do every year, and my community loves it.
Well, that's awesome. That's great advice. And you said something at the very beginning that I want to be sure to emphasize is that you don't need a lot of money to start investing. You don't have to be a wealthy person. You don't have to have a huge income. That investing is open to everyone. And so, we'll talk about more about where to find you, but is your challenge available like on your website or is in your book?
It is. So I do have the podcast, my Money Adventures podcast. It's on YouTube, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, but there's also a link on my personal website that will direct you to all the work that I do. What I don't have on the website at the moment is the challenge that I'm speaking about, but it forms part of the email newsletter that I distribute every now and then to my community. So that's where the conversation really happens in terms of the investment community or the investment challenge. So it happens a lot on my email newsletter, but all the other touch points, whether it's social media, whether it's my website, whether it's my YouTube channel, or my podcasts on the different platforms that I mentioned, you will find access to this challenge, but I speak about it predominantly in the to the email newsletter community.
Okay, fantastic. And just for everybody watching and listening, at the end, as we wrap up, but we'll ask about you can find TK, and then of course, as always, there'll be links in the show notes. So TK, what money myth are you trying to break?
Oh, I'm trying to break the money myth that money is for certain people. Hence, let's change the script, the title, let's change the script. So a lot of people feel very undeserving of money, or they feel like money is the root of all evils, or they feel like money is meant for certain people and not them. So for me, I'm trying to change the myth that money is for everybody. Money is basically a tool that enables you to achieve the life that you want to achieve. In fact, that enables you to achieve the goals that you want to achieve and live the life that you want to achieve. Money is, in my opinion, it's energy. It flows from one point to the next. What's important is At which point do you grab it and use it to achieve and build the life that you want to achieve? So for me, the method I want to shift that I'm working towards is let's change the script. Let's change the script. How you speak about money, how you think about money, how you use money can either build or break you. So for me, money is for everybody. It is in abundance. It's about where and how you position yourself strategically to grab what you need or how much you need of it to achieve and build the life that you want to achieve.
Awesome, awesome. That's great advice. And I mean, money is for everybody. It's not exclusive. Everybody. I mean, if you're not earning a lot of money, you're still earning some money, and you're still paying rent or buying a house or whatever. So you're still dealing with money, no matter your income level or wealth level or whatever. So it's important to do that. So TK, what is your go-to favorite money resource, whether it's a podcast, book, newsletter, app, website? What do you turn to?
Lately, I used to be my go-to resource used to be a book, books, different books by different authors within the finance space and within other industries. Lately, it's podcasts, for example, your podcast, like I mentioned, there's a few podcasts that I listen to from the African continent. My own podcast is also a favorite resource. A few podcasts that I listen to from Europe, from Asia and also from Australia, because what I try to understand is through podcasts is money in different contexts, in different countries, in different communities, the principles are the same. And I'm starting to appreciate that the principles are the same. There will be nuances here and there, but for me, the podcasts are go-to podcast actually. And then the second resource is YouTube, right? Because through YouTube, I get to connect with the viewer or the host of the podcast. I get to see them. I get to know people virtually. So sometimes when people, when I'm watching videos on YouTube, it feels like I know this person because they live in my living area. They live on my phone. They live on my laptop. I hear them as I'm driving to work or doing whatever it is. So I feel like the world has become so much interconnected that I could be sitting here with Tony. Tony's in the US. TK is in Africa, Lesotho, the Kingdom of Lesotho. And here we're having a conversation. So for me, YouTube, podcasts, books, um, and then absolutely love in-person events. Like I mentioned earlier on, I was at FinCon in 2023, October in New Orleans. I was absolutely excited about that. I'm looking forward to attending FinCon again in the US this year. I think it's September or something. So the other resource that I love to do is going to actual events because the energy at the event, the connections that you make, the interactions are ever so inspiring.
That's so cool. And thank you for mentioning my podcast. And one thing that's been really cool is I've really tried to have an international, um, I guess, audience, or I'm not sure quite the right word, but footprint. And I just saw in my podcast downloads on my host that I've had downloads from 97 different countries, which is really cool. Is that, and you and I have spoken on international panels, is that, like you said, is we're, having international conversations, which is exactly, you and I talked about this pre-show. It's not about particular investments. You and I haven't talked about like which, you know, exchange traded fund is the best. Is,
Sure, sure.
we've had these more general conversations. So, I hope that's useful for the audience, but I feel that these are conversations we're having around the world. So TK, to close out, what is your number one tip on changing the way we think about money?
Ooh, that's a very difficult one. So number one tip is,
Mm.
I'll actually have to think about this. Number one tip, I would say financial planning is not for the elite. Financial planning is accessible to everybody. People often think that to work with a financial planner, you need to spend a lot of money to work with a financial planner. Financial planning does not necessarily equate to you sitting down with a financial planner. Technology has made it very easy for us to get access to information. I do caution people to also be responsible when they're taking information on social media platforms or on our podcast to, yes, take the knowledge, but interrogate it further, do a bit of more research. But financial planning is not exclusive for the rich and wealthy. I believe that every single person has a right to quality financial advice. And once they have that financial advice, it then shapes the decisions that they make. The challenge, however, with access to financial advice, it should move beyond financial advice because if you don't implement the advice, then it's all in vain. There's a popular saying in our world as financial personal finance podcasters and speakers and people in that space where we always say it's 80%, it's financial well-being is 80% behavior and 20% knowledge, you know. So in order for you to achieve and see that transformation in your financial life, you need to do the work. And the work is not always going to be fancy, it's not always going to be cute. Sometimes it does get emotional. Sometimes you need to get your hands dirty. Sometimes you need to let go of a certain lifestyle, downgrade in order for you to rebuild and get to where you want to go. But Tony, in closing, I would say financial advice is the best gift that anybody can give to themselves. Gift yourself with a session with a financial coach. Listen to Tony's podcast, listen to TK's podcast, and really just invest resources in improving your financial knowledge. Because when you are financially empowered, you are then in a position to make informed financial decisions. And when you make the financial decisions, you are then able to transform your life. So financial planning is accessible to everybody. Let's invest in ourselves and in our knowledge.
That's great. That's wonderful advice. And I think for everyone is, you said so many awesome things. I'm trying to, make notes on all of them. But I think one thing that you did say that I think people need to be mindful of is there is a lot of financial advice. And so you have to consider the source and what they're talking about. And if there's a bias, are they being paid to sell you something? Or is it
Absolutely.
somebody, like you and I, who is out there as an educator? Giving access and not recommending a product or a service or anything, and encouraging you to do your own research. And
Mm,
that's, I think, the difference. And as you talk about, is that it is the best gift you can give yourself. Is the more questions you can ask, the more information you can seek. I guess it was Diogenes who was searching for the truth. And maybe that's it, is be Diogenes and search for the truth about money,
mm,
uh, but always make your own decisions. Um, don't be, it was funny. I was on another podcast yesterday talking about fraud and scams, and that's a
mm,
huge sign of fraud and scams is when people are pressuring you to make a certain decision. Anytime somebody is putting on pressure, that's a bad thing. Take your time, and as you point out, learn. So, TK, where can people find out more about you? Check out your podcast and pick up a copy of Let's Change the Script. I did check, it is available in the Amazon US store. So I know
Yes,
it's there.
yes, it is. Yes, it is
It
available on
is.
the it's available on Amazon for those who are not in Africa. If you are in Africa, it's available on Takealot. It's also available on my website, TKOfinancialwellness.com. I'm sure you'll plug it into the show notes below. And in terms of where people can find me, I am on social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I am on LinkedIn, I am on TikTok,
Wow.
TK Nthebe. I'm also very big on YouTube. So if you just search TK Nthebe, TKAY Nthebe, you should find my content. It's also called, the podcast is called My Money Adventures because I believe that money is an adventure that we need to enjoy. Yeah, I'm also on YouTube, Spotify, and also on Apple Podcasts. So my website is www.tkaynthebe.com, which is a one-stop shop for all the work that I do. And for those who want to travel to Lesotho and see the African continent, I also do have a show called Escapes with TK that really documents and highlights my travel experiences across the different African countries and the US and some of the European countries I've visited. So if you're looking and you're curious about traveling the African continent, check out Escapes with TK on YouTube, and then let's have a conversation. My DMs are very open. I'm very open. I'm very responsive. Let's have a conversation about anything money related, lifestyle, or travel in totality.
Awesome, awesome. And I love how you wrap all those things together. And so, as you mentioned, for everybody watching and listening, as always, there will be all those links in the show notes so you can connect with TK, check out his podcast, pick up a copy of his book, or just go to his website and subscribe to the newsletter so you can find out about the challenge. So, TK, thanks for joining us today on the Get Ready Money podcast.
Tony, so thank you so much for having me. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation and I love the work that you're doing. It's not always easy growing a community. It's not always easy being consistent. But for me, I see your posts on LinkedIn and I always engage with it. I see the podcast and the consistency. So I wish you health, I wish you wealth, and I wish you a lot of growth as you're building your podcast and your community. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks, TK. And I wish you the same. And I appreciate your kind words. And keep doing the work yourself. I mean, that's how we connected. And a shout out to Benjamin
To
Nathan Kateri
Benjamin.
for for connecting us. And he's been a guest on this podcast as well. So I'd recommend checking out his episode and some of the work he's doing. So I'll make a note to reference Benjamin in the show notes so everybody can check him out because he's doing some amazing work and he's out of Ghana. So
Yeah.
as we talked about, international community, Ghana, different country. So everyone, thank you as always for tuning into this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and to tell a friend. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.